This is my mother's hands. When my mother's hands were young as sunrise, they could soothe the pain from a startled day, could hush a crying morning, pale as easy sunlight, yet strong as willow tendrils when she worked her garden. I could follow her fingers pointing to sounds she made, and her voice behind a palm yawned with drowsy words. Her hands were language. Her grip fragile as small birds, could have touched the world, but she held me instead. When they pointed to a flower or played a favorite waltz, her hands became music that taught my words to sing. If praise is all they hold now, there is still the warmth they held. I remember her fine hands as the first thought I grasped. This is titled Skates. Teaching the joy of wind in my face, the cold rush of ice breathing in my hair. He held me up at first, my legs dangling like twigs, ankles bending beneath me, then raised me in his arms, lifting me as I closed my eyes on our moon-capped yard. When he told me I had flown, how my blades caught the ice, slicing silver off the moon, I knew what flying was. The power to leave the world and wrap my breath cloud words around a lonely star and hold on, even as it shot across the sky and fell when he wasn't there.
In the cave of contemplation, for whoever wants to pick up the torch. When speaking in the short squint from forenoon to gloom of Updike, where am I headed? There are days that fit me into footpaths no longer present, beyond metaphor. Here leaves continue to pulse long after they've sunk in mulch. Here the ball's solipsism arcs from hand to sky and back in deltas of stillborn time. Here waves flick their tongues and brush clean the ravages that gather around us in the day-to-day. I find myself standing bemused in someone else's past, a park, a bench. Schoolyard children skip into old age, run through brick walls, ascend to hollow ground. An abandoned tire comes to rest on its flank. Oil-skimmed water quivers in a rubber pool. Sunlight sparks. I kneel, plunge my hands into silt to scoop the sacerdotal larvae, to hold them towards the fierce radiance. They shimmer for a still moment before vanishing. I, on the other hand, am still here, trapped thinking of Updike, rabbits, afternoons that taste precariously like dust. Ode to a Citizen of Vienna. For Tim. From the edge of a kitchen faux balcony in the late afternoon dance of dust and sunlight, he contemplates the cobblestones laid out like dragon scales of a giant heaving creature predating Vindabona itself. With spirit glass in hand and dreamy cherub smile, he brushes aside the world of those far from birthrights spurned to life on Canadian prairie, now much more conversant with Vienna's dialects and the intricacies of an operatic grand piano. Chair tilted backwards in this tight psychic space, he awaits a friend who, grinning, will soon sit neither knee and spread syrupy gossip, both thankful for the rays warming the hairs on their arms, and one dreaming of the lover who must one day sweep him away. Another look inside Plato's cave. In the rush to escape talk of darkness and ghosts, we all too often flip on lights that blind rather than, well, I think you know what I'm getting at. What is the key thing about a line of poetry? Darkness or light? We are taught that one reflects a crawling about in that unwanted state of unknowing. The other, the brilliance of eureka and measured lines in bathtubs. Light years apart, as the expression goes. Let us take a step back for a moment, back into the cave that started it all. Well, it didn't. Remember being without form and void? Chimeria, where the sun never shines, the Devas and the Asuras, scorpions guarding Kornogi, dark and dreary Kala. Ah yes, the cave, and the assurance that what we, the shackled prisoners, see are shadows cast by or behind our back fire that both illuminates and deceives. Or to make things a little more 21st century, light from an iPhone's flashlight Galaxy app with a selfie that refuses to be taken. The implication, of course, being that there is something beyond the cave, beyond the shadows, that one has a choice to head deeper into the cavern or to walk out through the mouth into the blaze of day. But Socrates, as always hedging his bets, did say he was being allegorical. And what does that imply? That the cave wasn't really a cave? That beyond the cave there exists what? Simply another cave? That shedding the shackles means choosing between a Pyrrhonian half-dark and the half-light of Diogenes? But there's no poetry in that. No magic use of words to burn through the smoke screen of the senses. No hope of ever ascending to Plato. So what's to be done? Well, how about this? Rather than futile attempts to loosen the chains, have you freed yourself or just think you have? Rather than busting a gut to escape the cave, have you stepped outside or just think you have? Why not find a position that doesn't stop the flow of blood? Make yourself comfortable, sprinkle some doubt over your popcorn, and add your own shadows to the wall. I know, most definitely plan B, but you must admit, at the very least, it keeps you safe from both darkness and light. Thank you.
To make a bridge, and it's dedicated to my nonnas. To make a bridge. A letter, like an overpass that touches both history and posterity, asks we prick up ears, learn patience in the present while waiting for the past to answer on paper. Poems are sideways viaducts that versify buried stories into arching alphabets, sentencing words into roads of imagined images. But while I craft mouthfuls of ink, you spell out another bridge. Precious plates of penne, heart-raving ravioli, all smothered with the sugo you schooled me to craft. Do you see how you guide my emerging hand? I never traversed an ocean, though I ache to translate your teachings. Bridge making isn't a rigid refrain for traveling from A to B, but an act of creation that ushers us across time and in between stories. An act of navigating, exploring the bearings that bind each to the other. It's called the Cabinet of Fame. Sarah insisted they ought to have oak bones, a gold-tinted skeleton, enclosed by glass that's ice-like and glossy, keyed safe, freezing internal keepsakes as spectacles. He crafted her command from a wedge of wood. Long curls spun from his chisel and dropped to grease-stained concrete. While circling the slowly shrinking subject, his steel-toed boots trampled twirls of timber, a laurel patchwork of flat splinters, rumors for the dustpan. He sanded out nuisance knots. Tree dust splashed across his limbs, clung to curly, sweat-festered hairs, nestled into knuckle valleys and cuticle crescents, all so she could feast through furniture. And the last poem I'm going to read is actually right in the middle of the book. It's the intermezzo. Between arugula greens and aromatic espresso, the fruit platter signals a spell of cleansing. Between lusty crimson strawberries, lush cantaloupe flesh, fennel slices, crisp aqueous crescents with licorice hints that blot vinegar stains on my tongue. Crunching, I chronicle school shenanigans. Zios and Zias listen up, swaying their own children from neon-wrapped candies. Nonna rinses sugo off dinner plates, an adagio. Water sloshes, swirls round the bowl, mixing with cold tomato leftovers. Pulpy red specks whirlpool down the drain. Nonno takes a space at the table's edge, slicing a peach. Dismembered chunks plop into his glass of vino, a speechless ballad. He will retrieve the fruit with his knife, yield the pit to the crumb-dusted tablecloth. One of the grandchildren will spot the peach fiber and, perhaps, gnaw at the remains.
Before I close, I asked each one of these writers to read 3 poems, and Bruce, I'd like you to finish, if you wouldn't mind, with a poem.
This is a poem about poetry. It's titled, before the pandemic, I used to go and give readings at the nursing home here in Barrie. I know Marty's been there too, and it's called Barrie Manor. And this is a poem titled, To the Manor Born. A woman named Sybil wants to die. I describe to her the Sybil's I've seen, how they live forever in chapel arches, how their hearts break, but not their wills. I tell her poetry doesn't have an age. She could start writing now and do fine work. She tells me to go fuck myself. And maybe that's all there is to writing. It is Poetry Day at the Seniors Manor. Others tell me they will die as well, that next time I visit they won't be there. No one recovers from growing old. I read them a sonnet that's lasted 5 centuries, lines about blooming in eternal time. One says it's all a load of rot. Another says I offer false hope. A third wants to hear me read more sonnets, pleads to know how long life lasts, remembers a garden during the war, the sound of sirens distant in London, the strength of poetry to pull her through. She tells me the first time he kissed her, describes the fragrance of roses in June, confesses no life speaks the language of death, though death deserves a place in our words, the nether realm that never speaks to us. A rose is a rose, but a rose only once. I ask why they need to believe the truth. Ask they be actors and join the illusion, that they play their parts in many ages. Will they give me the patience of a living thought? Will they dine on a feast prepared by Keats, or drink of fine wine of a Rubaiyat? She tells me the taste of fruit was sex. She can see the future from a mountaintop. I ask her what tomorrow holds. She says she will give me my answer then.
Thank you, Bruce. I do remember the Barrie Manor, and I've read there before, and it's one of those crazy readings, though, where your audience gets so excited or wants to react to something that they interrupt your poem. I mean, it's wonderful because there are so many readings you go to, it's so silent, and you read and you can almost hear the echo of your own voice in a room. But there, they'll interrupt you and because something that you've said that maybe they don't agree with, or something that they an image that you've painted for them, and they love it. And I love going there. It's they're a wonderful group of people. So in closing, I want to thank all 3 of you for sharing with us your poetry and your thoughts, your perspectives on editing, and for the audience out there, please join us again on A Poet's Voice. Thank you, all 3. Wonderful reading.